Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, IT West organized webinar, the first in the fall semester of 2024. It is my pleasure to welcome our speaker today, Pat Yongpradit. Pat is the Chief Academic Officer for Code.org, but what is more important in today's context is that Pat is also lead of the TeachAI, the global TeachAI initiative to guide education leaders in rethinking education in an age of AI, as it says. It is really a pleasure to welcome you, Pat. You have quite a lot of experience with the educational systems on the ground floor as a teacher and also at the highest political influencer level, as you may say. So, Pat, without further ado, the floor is yours, and I'm looking very much forward to your presentation. And let me just say here before giving finally the word to you, everybody, please interact with us, with Pat in particular, through the Q&A, but also with each other in the chat forum on the webs, in the Zoom meeting, of course. So, Pat, the floor is yours. Welcome.
All right. Hi, Ella Samen. Is that okay, Michael?
Very good, very good.
My name is Pat Yongpradit. I'm glad to be here. Please, like Michael said, please engage in the chat, ask questions in the Q&A. But if you have comments, also just put them in the chat. I like multitasking while I present, and I love seeing people engage on the side. I won't be distracted at all. In fact, I might speak and engage with you at the same time in the chat. So please, again, engage in the chat. To any of my Danish friends that I know, just want to say hi. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I have a gift for you right from the beginning, and that's my slides. So you can get to my slides through this bit.ly link. I'll put it in the chat as well, bit.ly/DenmarkAI, easy to remember. And feel free to make a copy of my slides, edit them. Most of you will be responsible for probably talking about AI at some point in the future. Please use my slides. With that, I'll begin. The title of this webinar is Leading While Learning in an Age of AI. And a little bit about myself. I used to be a teacher. I taught for 13 years, special education, science and computer science, middle school and high school. And I currently live in Maryland on the East Coast of the US. And this is a picture of me, I believe, from the last year I taught, which was 2013. And since then, I've been at Code.org for about 11 and a half years now. And I am Code.org's Chief Academic Officer. Code.org, if you don't know, is a nonprofit based in the US with global influence. And our vision is that every student in every school should have the opportunity to learn computer science and AI. And this presentation today is focused on AI. I'll talk a little bit about computer science, or as in Denmark, you know it as informatics. And I'll be speaking from my other hat, leading TeachAI, which is an initiative. And this initiative is led by Code.org, ETS, ISTE, Khan Academy, and the World Economic Forum. It is a global initiative, and it's all about guiding education leaders and policymakers and teachers and educators in transforming education through teaching with AI and teaching about AI. Now, here comes the first piece of information for you if you're new to AI and education conversations. When we think about AI in education, we want to think about it in two buckets. There's teaching with AI, which is using it as an education technology tool. And that tool might be used for teacher support, student learning, and school management and operations. So even like handling all the data that schools create about students and sifting through that data to identify at-risk students. That's teaching with AI. But then there's teaching about AI, which is about understanding how AI works, but not just the technical side of things, but also the ethical and social implications. Also understanding the capabilities and limitations. We'll talk a little bit about that today. And what you should know about the about AI side is that it borrows from a variety of fields, including informatics, but also social studies, math, science, psychology, etc. TeachAI has a very large advisory committee that spans the world, from organizations like the Association for Advancing Artificial Intelligence all the way to the World Bank. Civil society organizations, large tech companies like Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, but also smaller companies that focus on more local regions, but all over the world. There are also more than 25 global government agencies, including my colleagues from the Faroe Islands. If you're here, I'm just saying hello. And certainly we'd welcome anyone from the Denmark Ministry of Education to join TeachAI as well. Please reach out to me later if you're interested. The key question we'll be wrestling with today is, what are the conditions to help Denmark realize the benefits of AI in education and mitigate the risks? You see, we're at the very beginning, and I cannot cover everything that you need to know for AI in education. The way I think about webinars like these is I think about creating the conditions for you and starting your journey or helping you along your journey that you've already started. Because this is going to be a very big deal over a longer period of time. And it's really wonderful that you all have chosen to engage in this webinar and approach the whole AI thing from the education side of things. For me personally, this whole AI and education thing, regardless of the AI tools themselves, regardless of chatbots and things like that, it's an opportunity for educators to re-emphasize things that have always been important. Human skills like critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, social interaction, social emotional learning, competency-based education, all these things, project-based learning, all these things that we find important now either have an engine through AI where we can achieve these things at a faster and higher scale, or provides context for discussing these things like ethical and social impacts of technology. What a rich context AI is for discussing ethics in technology. Something that we always should have been doing. I'm going to start with my recommendations and end with my recommendations. And if you're on this call and you have not tried to use one of these freely available chatbots, AI chatbots, to solve a relevant problem to your life, whether professionally or personally, you should do that. And you should do it often, because only when you experiment with these things and connect it to relevant problems in your life, only when you do that will you understand the capabilities and limitations, the benefits and risks. So my first recommendation is experiment with AI yourself. If you're a leader of an organization, maybe a department or a team or a school region, a municipality, you need to also, after you experiment with AI yourself, bring in the rest of the people in your organization and help them experiment. Do a show and tell. Here's an idea. Next time you do a staff meeting, take 30 minutes, get everyone on their laptops, and have them actually try out different things and show what they've learned to other people. Not only is it relevant and people will learn something that might help them in their job, but they're also sharing it with others as well. And so it's organizational level learning. And so the second recommendation is to also create an AI committee. And that AI committee will help create guidance and policies for the organization. A third recommendation is to promote AI literacy in relevant curriculum and instruction. I don't suppose that there will be space in our very busy school schedules to create an AI literacy course. There might be, and if there is, great. But more than likely, we'll have to integrate it, and we should want to integrate it in relevant subjects. I'll be talking a little bit about that later, but that's my third recommendation. My fourth recommendation is create AI guidance, and this is a very big deal. In fact, I'll talk about it right now. I was going to save it for later. But in Massachusetts, in the US, there is a family that has sued the school district. So put out a lawsuit against the school district because a teacher, their kid's teacher, gave the student a bad grade for using AI on an assignment. And this family said that there was no guidance provided about whether, how to use AI or not. And in fact, the kid didn't cheat. The kid just created an outline of an essay using an AI tool. And they claim that that's not cheating and that doesn't go against the school's policies. And the problem is the school didn't have policies at the time. And so this is a problem. Regardless of lawsuits, we need to provide guidance so that we can also realize the benefits of AI in our school systems. Not just for doing the same old thing, but faster and more efficient, but doing different things, better things. I want to applaud my colleagues at Lego who have been really supporting the idea of creativity in our school systems. And you might think that AI and creativity really don't go together, but AI is used tremendously in creative fields, whether graphic design or just even coming up with ideas. But we also don't want AI to supplant the building of our own creative muscles. So it's a very nuanced situation. And number 5, we want to build on the existing informatics and digital competency efforts that you've already had in Denmark. And we'll be talking about that later, but what you should understand from this recommendation is that AI is not different from these efforts. AI supercharges these efforts, or AI advances these efforts. So, I'm a teacher, and it'd be important that I talk about what AI actually is. And I'm going to get a little technical here, but I've refined this presentation so that it makes sense to everyone. Let's see if I'll do a good job. All right. And for those of you who actually don't know what AI is, though you've been using it, this is your chance to become an AI expert. Here we go. So when defining AI, we want to think about programs or machines that simulate tasks that require human intelligence. That's a very simple definition. And I mean, that's what it is, artificial intelligence. And when we talk about intelligence, we're talking about our intelligence. And artificial is just programs or machines simulating these things. Now, what are these things? Well, making predictions, generating content, and providing recommendations. These are very 3 simple but powerful things that AI can do for us. Now, that's a definition of AI, but that doesn't really tell you what it is. So let's start off with a simple program. So early in the 50s, when the idea of AI came around, people used a symbolic notation like this, actually, just like syntax of a programming language to describe intelligent routines. In this case, this is a procedure or a program used to identify someone's symptoms and then ask other questions to hopefully create some type of diagnosis from their symptoms. You can imagine if there were 50, 100, or 1,000 of these if-then style statements, you could use it to pretty much approximate medical expertise. There's 2 problems here. Number 1, you need to type in every single rule yourself. Number 2, this program, this artificial intelligence, only does one thing and can only do that. It can't do anything else. And it doesn't learn, which a lot of people say really isn't intelligent in the first place. You can call this classical AI. And classical AI didn't require that much computational power. It was a pretty straightforward kind of thing. Now, flash forward to the 70s, and this idea of machine learning came about. And machine learning benefited from the fact that computers were getting more and more powerful. And so the 70s, 80s, 90s, and onwards really represented a boon, an explosion in machine learning. And instead of telling the computer every single thing you want it to think and do, instead, you give it algorithms and the ability to create relationships on its own, to learn, basically. And that little chart there represents how a computer might sort out information or come up with some type of decision matrix on its own. Now, instead of giving it rules, you need to give it data. Lots and lots of data that it can learn from, and again, create relationships amongst different points, data points. And that's why we call this machine learning. It requires lots of data, it requires lots of computational power, and algorithms for learning. And from machine learning, we get now what we know as a variety of features in applications, email filters, translation apps, autocomplete text. All these things are examples of machine learning. Now, where are we now? We're in the age of generative AI. And generative AI builds off of this idea of deep learning, which, just for simplicity's sake, is more advanced machine learning. Let's just keep it simple, all right? I don't need to talk about neural networks or layers or anything like that. And what you need to know is that deep learning can benefit from even more data. All the data on the internet, in fact. And from that, we can create things like large language models, which means exactly what you think it means. It's a model, it's a large model of language and how it works. And from that model, so now a computer can understand the relationships between different words and sentences and meanings. Now that it can do that, we can use it to generate text. And so now we have generative AI. And yes, we know about chatbots, but as you know, it can generative AI is about creating much more than just text. It can create images, videos, music, etc. Now, for those of you out there who talk about AI, this is the point where you want to talk about the implications of generative AI. And so, for example, transparency and explainability. Now, I showed you that graphic of deep learning, and the problem with deep learning is that there are billions, trillions of ways of, how do I word this, of little ideas that AI models are connecting to one another, billions and trillions. And this leads to issues related to transparency and explainability, meaning you don't have a program that has 100 or 1,000 or 100,000 lines anymore. You have something vastly different, and you don't know how to explain how the AI model came up with something. And in fact, you run it one time and you get one output, you run it at the same time and next time with the same thing and you get a different output. What's going on here? This is not like a normal program. And so transparency and explainability are a problem. How do you trust something when you don't know how it really, really works? And then with all that data that we're pulling from everywhere, we know for sure there's going to be bias in that data, human bias, societal bias. And how do we make sure that that bias isn't amplified in our models? How do we make sure that these powerful models, students don't over-rely on them? Humans, adults don't over-rely on them, right? If they can write an email for me, why might I not use it to write emails for me all the time? For us, AI and education teachers or advocates or experts, we have to be very careful about over-reliance on these tools because they are powerful And we as humans, as adults, we have built the muscles to do these things. Kids have not. So we need to be very careful. And we also need to remember that the learning process is built off of, is built on a foundation of productive struggle. And these AI tools don't often don't often promote productive struggle. In fact, they do the opposite. They just want to give you the easy answer immediately. Another thing that you should understand is that the answer is not a factual answer. There's no fact checking, really. What these models optimize for is something that sounds good. That's why it's a large language model and not a large fact model. So there are many misconceptions about AI. Here are three of them. People think that the word intelligence means that it thinks in the same way as people do, but it does it faster. No, the way you should think about AI is that it's actually like an alien life form. It can do some of the same things that we do, but it gets to those ends in very different ways. And oftentimes it doesn't even know what it's doing the same way we know what we're doing. And the mistakes it makes aren't the same mistakes we make. In some cases, it could seem vastly intelligent. In other cases, it might not even be able to count properly or do simple math properly. So, we have to always remember that even though it's called artificial intelligence, it's not that it's just artificial like exactly like us, but faster. It's vastly just very, very different. A lot of people believe that all AI is alike, and there's a variety of AI. Some people who've gotten into the AI game recently think AI is all generative AI. In fact, we've been using AI and actually search engines like Google. You've seen the change to Google search engine. There's now that summary at the beginning. But AI has always been used in Google search engines, just not maybe the generative type. So all AI is not alike. And in fact, we need to move beyond the idea of AI is bad, AI is good, or AI in education is good, AI in education is bad. It really depends on the subject, depends on the use case. It depends on the student. It's a very nuanced technology. And all AI and all AI use cases are not alike. And I think most people understand that bias in AI comes from data, but it doesn't only come from data. And this is important because we need to understand that we play a role in the decisions to include bias in AI models. AI bias comes from the way we design AI, the decisions we make, what we value, how we test it, how we deploy it, everything. And all those things are controlled by humans. Data obviously is controlled by humans, but when you're pulling it in at the rate of millions and billions of pieces of data, it's very hard for us to sift through it. So we should understand that we do play a role when it comes to bias. It doesn't just come from data. And we need to realize that we've been here before. Those of you on this call, some of you are old enough to remember when calculators were first introduced into schools. And you might remember how maybe your parents were like, no, don't use a calculator. You need to understand how to, do math in your head and do it fast on your own. Initially teachers were very worried. They were worried that kids would grow over reliant on these calculators. And, if the battery died, then suddenly you wouldn't be able to do math. And some teachers saw it as an opportunity to break the bonds of calculation and get into the more creative aspects of math and the more problem-solving aspects of math. There was a time, folks, when being smart in math was just about being able to calculate things fast with pencil and paper. And I know that's silly to think about, but that wasn't that long ago. Now, being smart in math is really understanding the ideas and being able to solve problems. That wasn't the case for most students 50 years ago. And here are some statements that were made about calculators. You'll see that AI actually can replace the word calculator. and these sentences will still make sense. So here's one quote from an article: calculators stretch students' interests and allow for more relevant kinds of problems and increase motivation. Well, you can just substitute AI tools, and actually that applies to AI tools as well. In the same way, one of the important uses of calculators is to enable children to solve more interesting problems and to work out long division, which would otherwise discourage them. Remember those days, long division? And, and a lot of people would find, a lot like me, I would enjoy it. It'd be fun, But really, that's not math. That's not real math. That's not like the conceptual, like fun, beautiful side of math. It's just calculation. Long division is just a means to an end to understanding bigger concepts in math. Unfortunately, a lot of people were stuck in long division. And in fact, long division was often a barrier for people. But with the calculator, we were able to get over that barrier to get to more interesting problems, like AI will do for us if we use it right. I told Michael that I would be pausing even before the end. And so this is actually one of those pause points. So if you made it this far, know that the rest of this is where I get really, really practical. But I actually want to pause and stop sharing and see if there were any questions in the chat that I missed, or if there are any questions that people just want to ask in the chat right now. So if you have a question, please, please, please put it in the chat right now. I'll address it. If you're like me and you can only handle so much of someone talking to you and you want to engage, please put in a question. If you don't have a question and you want to think of a question that someone else might have, put in a question that someone else might have, and I'll answer that. And Michael, feel free to also just come on and just ask me your own question as well.
Sure, I will do. I guess you will come to that, Pat, but one of the things the use of AI in various subjects, because you have sort of characterized AI in education so far, and I'm wondering, when we talk about generative AI and large language models, it's often from a very general perspective, but subjects, of course, are very different in nature. And so I wonder if you have any experience, direct or indirect, or ideas for inspirational use of AI in different subjects, say, literature, social science, math, foreign language, natural science, etc. So those topics are very, very different in nature, and so will I suppose also the use of AI in those specific contexts be. So if you have any, good experiences from various subjects, it would be really interesting to hear. Not necessarily now, but it could be later when it fits your presentation.
Yeah, actually, Michael, I'm about to get into that and get into applications and like practical recommendations.
Perfect.
Thanks for queuing that up. I don't see any questions here, so I'm just going to.
I don't see. I'm following also, and I don't see anyone, neither in the QA or in the chat.
Okay. Well, folks, please think about these questions. I'll pause before the end again, and hopefully I'll get some questions. I love answering questions. So I'm going to get back to my slide deck because I will actually address what Michael just brought up, which is practical recommendations and what AI looks like in the classroom. So let's talk about AI tools. And here is an example from the US, but it actually, I think it's available outside the US now. And it's from Khan Academy. It's their tool called Khanmigo. I'm going to play this video here and narrate over it. But what you're going to see is a tool that can be used in a variety of subjects. I'll also talk about specific subjects later as well. So it's a suite of tools and a variety of different things. Here's this lesson plan tool. And what you would do in this lesson plan tool is describe your topic and then, input your standards, local standards, Denmark standards, and then create some notes. And the notes here are: my kids love Taylor Swift, and I teach only a 30-minute period. And so this lesson plan generator would create a lesson plan. Now, teachers, this doesn't mean that you copy and paste it and execute it just as is, but boy, this does give you a lot of ideas very quickly. And that's the value of a large language model that has pulled in data from all over the internet, including teacher resources as well. You can even ask this particular tool to change particular pieces. Customization is a feature that all AI tools should have, because we should never just take the output of an AI chatbot or whatever and just run with it. We should always customize it. Customizing it might mean copy and pasting and editing it, or it might mean editing it in the actual tool. Here's another tool as well. And in this tool, it's a rubric generator. And rubrics, gosh, rubrics take so long and are so tedious sometimes for teachers to create, but we know we should create them, right? And this is a tool from Magic School, which again might be available in Denmark. It does the same kind of thing. It has these different fields and you type in different things, and then you would get a rubric that comes out of it. Again, rubrics, we know that we should use them on many of our assignments, but creating the rubric is just sometimes tedious. And so this is a great tool for that.
You'll see that with many tools you can choose from, but in this case,
but there are other types of tools as well. Tools that allow you to understand how students are doing. So it's not just tools to create teacher resources, it's tools to analyze student data. And in this tool, the teacher is asking the AI tool, the AI assistant, to help them understand where students are at per a different, per various concepts. And so you can actually ask an AI tool to understand how students are doing and where they might need help. Lisbeth, I see your question. I'm going to answer that. Thank you. I'm going to show you one more thing, though, folks. This is my current favorite tool right now, which is something called Block Talk that comes out of Harvard. This is specifically the Creative Computing Lab, which does a lot of work with the Scratch programming environment. Scratch programming is a block-based programming environment, and it's used for young kids. And one of the things that an informatics teacher needs to know how to do very well is help students debug a program, fix a program, without giving them the answers. And so this is a teacher simulation that uses a large language model to simulate a student that has problems with their program. And so a teacher could practice their questioning techniques with this large language model. Very fun, and what's great about this is that it's, a machine, meaning if you mess up or whatever, it doesn't have consequences for a real human. And so this is a wonderful example in informatics, but you can imagine these questioning technique teacher simulators being used in a variety of subjects as well. Interestingly enough, a lot of these AI chatbots these days have a feature that allows you to customize your own chatbot. So even if you might not have this in your social science class or your biology class, you could actually create one and it actually wouldn't be that difficult. Lisbeth asks, how do we ensure that AI helps students gain a higher level of understanding and not just to imitate understanding? What does that require from teachers? Oh boy. So Lisbeth, I was going to get into this later, so I'll answer a little bit now and a little bit later. But the first thing a teacher needs to do is understand what is actually most important. Like what are the key ideas? What are the key concepts, the key practices that they want their kids to learn, and what's most important? And now what that does is it allows you to focus, like if that's most important, these other things that were not as important, which might be handwriting or something, you can be flexible on those things, but you can by identifying the things that matter the most, you can focus on those and make sure that AI is not giving students the answers to those aspects of learning. Another way to make sure that kids gain that higher level of understanding, gosh, it depends on the subject. Let me think about math. Math is a great example. Math can often, AI tools in math can be used to just give students the answer and even show their work. But they can also be used to create multiple examples, if you're a math teacher, multiple examples of approaches to the same problem. And then students can evaluate those different approaches and talk about what issues there might have been in each approach and which approach that they'd pick and why. And so you see here, AI can be used as a tool for doing the thing, or AI can be used as a tool to create the conditions, in this case, 3 different mathematical approach representations, and then ask kids to look at those different approaches. One thing that you need to be very careful with when you're a teacher is not to use AI for a subject that you don't understand, because then you won't have as much ability or confidence in being able to evaluate that AI output. So that's another tip. But Lisbeth, I'll go into that more in detail later on. And Michael put in a question about many of the teachers in all subjects at my high school are far behind what you can expect in using computers. Oh, yes. How can we train teachers in both computer use and generative AI? Okay. All right. So, that's interesting. I said that my fifth recommendation was to build on your existing informatics and digital competency efforts. And what's wonderful about generative AI interfaces is that the outputs are quite powerful, but the way you interact with it is actually very very easy. It's a known interface if you're using a text chatbot, so very similar to a search engine, except you just want to tell someone, rather than just type something in once, you want to type something in over and over again until it's almost like a conversation. And in the same way, you could actually have a conversation, because most of these AI chatbots now have a voice feature that allows you just to talk to it. And what a great way to interact with technology, just to talk to it back and forth to get what you want, compared to the hassle of going through different menus and all that. And so it actually makes digital literacy easier. It also gives you the opportunity to talk about the ethical and social impacts of technology as well, because it's right there, right in front of you. It's such a powerful tool, but it also shows a lot of bias, a lot of inaccuracies, a lot of misinformation. And so it's a rich context for talking about that. So whereas before you knew that you should talk about ethics in technology use, it was it was a more difficult thing, or you couldn't find as easily a relevant context. Now you can, especially for seniors, for those of us who have older parents who are constantly asking us for technology help. These AI interfaces make interacting with technology easier, but also it gives you a rich context for talking about deep fakes and scams, because scamming people, or whether it's older people or younger people, is way easier than ever before. And so again, generative AI creates the context for us having productive conversations about scamming, about cybersecurity as well, about data use. I'm going to answer one more question and then go to some key recommendations for you all. Let's see here, 3 to 5. Well, Ole, I'll actually touch on those recommendations now, and then if there were any questions that I missed from people, I'll go back. All right. So there is a need for AI guidance in our schools. And if you're in a school system that hasn't provided AI guidance, you should understand that anything could be happening in your classrooms. If you're a teacher who hasn't provided guidance, you should provide guidance. Because even if they're not using it in your classroom at the moment, they might be using it at home. And you might get in a situation like that situation I talked about at the beginning of this webinar, where due to the lack of guidance, kids do something, you apply some discipline, but because you didn't provide guidance in the first place, they can push back on that discipline, and ultimately the school could get in trouble. And we don't want that. And regardless of trouble and legal issues, the fact is that students just want guidance because they want AI to be helpful to them. And actually, I talk to students sometimes, and they don't all just want to cheat. They do want to learn. They do want to know the boundaries. And if kids are cheating on assignments, you need to think, why are they cheating on assignments? Do they feel like these assignments lack value or are irrelevant? And you need to ask yourself, how can you create assignments that are more authentic and real world? It's actually a good thing that students present more in class rather than just write things down in essay form. Think about how many times as adults we present, and how valuable like a speech class or a debate class would have been while we were learning. So in the same way, generative AI requires guidance to be used properly. And teachers want guidance as well because they don't want to get in trouble with their school systems. And when there's a lack of guidance, there's an increase of distrust. And so this is a couple stats from some US reports. They're very recent. One of them found that 46% of teens are using AI without permission. That doesn't mean they're using it in a way that is considered cheating. There's just no permission. They're just doing something that they might not should be doing. In terms of teachers, teachers are responding by using these Gen AI detection tools. And I'll tell you right now, if you're a teacher, those tools have a high rate of false positives. So you shouldn't rely on them. And let me give you an example. A lot of these tools are based off of particular models. So meaning they have a higher percent chance of being accurate when kids are using that particular model. But models change, number one. And number two, there are lots of different models. And so, these tools can never really be as accurate as you want them to be. And even if they were 100% accurate, would you want to create a police state in your classroom? I don't think so. And so what's happening in a lot of US classrooms right now is that teachers are more distrustful of kids. And so that's why we need guidance. And so there are these policy resources that are available at teachai.org/policy. I'll put them in the chat. And you can access these resources to learn more for yourself, or share these briefs with other people. There are one-pagers on purpose. There are even foundational policy ideas for those of you who are decision makers in your education system. There's also this AI Guidance for Schools toolkit, which is teachai.org/toolkit. And this provides guidance to people who are providing guidance. So don't worry, you're not alone. We know that you're a leader and that you're learning about AI at the same time, and you're being asked to give guidance on AI. This is a toolkit to help you. And it was great to have the European EdTech Alliance chime in and provide guidance on this work. So there are 7 principles that form the guidance. The first one is purpose, meaning the goal of AI in education is not to integrate AI in education. It's to improve education and do things that we already had as goals in education. And when we think about purpose, we can think about these 4 different questions, because your purpose might be, how do we stop kids from cheating, which is an important goal, but it's really not the goal that will drive transformative education. And in fact, in a lot of classes, it just drives a lot of distrust. You might also be thinking about the future, from a risk standpoint and thinking about, will AI replace teachers? And your goal might be that, for AI not to replace teachers. And then again, that might lead to banning AI, not teaching kids about AI, and again, creating distrust at an organizational level. On the other side, you might be thinking about opportunities, both present and future. How can we use AI tools to improve education, which means improve what we're doing right now? And then some of us are thinking about how AI can rethink education, how we can really innovate and use AI as the context, the rationale, and the engine to do that. But we really need to think about purpose, first of all, when we're thinking about AI in education. The second thing we want to think about is compliance with existing policies. This is important whether you're a teacher or you're a decision maker like an education leader. And there are 3 types of policies that you want to think about. The first one is a responsible use policy, like a technology policy. You want to review and critically assess AI outputs all the time, and you want to include that in your responsible use policy. When it comes to privacy policies, you want to make sure that people aren't inputting sensitive information. And when it comes to academic integrity policies, you want to make sure that teachers are responsible for clarifying appropriate and prohibited uses of AI tools. And that's going to differ based off of the subject, based on the assignment. By introducing these AI addendums to existing policies, you're reaffirming adherence to these policies and modernizing them. In terms of promoting AI literacy can easily be thought of as how to use AI and understanding how it works. That's a very simplistic understanding, by the way. And TeachAI, as well as a number of other global partners, are working on an AI literacy framework. But when you think about how AI works, you have to understand that it comes from how AI works is really dependent on a variety of concepts, starting with informatics, but also ethics, math, psychology, etc. And the better you understand how AI works, the more responsible you can use, the more responsibly you can use AI. So it's not, these 2 things are not separate things. These 2 things together form AI literacy. And for all of my informatics teachers or those who are promoting informatics in Denmark, just understand that informatics continues to be foundational in an age of AI. Things like ethics, algorithms, data programming, these things are foundational for AI, for robotics, for cybersecurity, for data science, et cetera, et cetera. And so we can't forget about informatics when it comes to promoting AI in education. There are 3 or 4 other principles as well. Balance is important. When we think about balance, we want to think about benefits and risks. So on the left side, content development and differentiation is a benefit of AI. But if you can create content with AI, you can also create dishonest content and misinformation with AI as well. So these are different sides of the same coin. And so these other examples like assessment design and timely effective feedback, that's a positive of AI. But when we rely on AI to grade assignments, we're losing accountability and diminishing our own agency. And when we use AI for creativity and collaboration, that's a great thing. But then we could become over-reliant and we lose our critical thinking skills. So these are things that we need to remember when approaching AI in education. And that's what our 4th principle. The 5th principle is academic integrity. And I talked about that earlier on in the case of that student who was caught cheating using AI. And ultimately, the recommendation here is for your subject and for an assignment, you need to be very clear about the use of AI. In some cases, you might allow them to use it to brainstorm. In other cases, you might allow them to actually create an actual product. It depends on the assignment. But teachers really need to be in charge of being clear about what use of AI is authorized. We also need to make sure that we, teachers and students, are always in a decision-making role when it comes to AI. And the easy way to do that is just review all AI outputs and not use AI when you don't understand the subject material. And lastly, we should evaluate the impacts of AI and regularly and constantly learn and apply those lessons learned. that's my presentation. And I know that we have some questions that are in the chat as well. So I will actually end with this. I'll leave that up there if you want to connect with me later on and talk about AI. I do that a lot. And there's the link in the chat. Now I'm going to go back through the questions and answer some of these questions. You mentioned that you're working on a framework. Will that include AI literacy curriculum? Well, Anna, code.org actually has a lot of AI literacy curriculum right now, including some videos from like top AI engineers, like the chief technology officer or former chief technology officer of OpenAI, Mira Murati, talking about how chatbots work. How cool is that to have the person who created ChatGPT talk about how ChatGPT works? So there are videos, there are lesson plans, etc., all about AI. On that same page, you'll find an AI 101 course meant for any teacher. So it's not just for informatics teachers. Mette says, most teachers are mainly concerned about students cheating. Yeah. Do not help in teacher understand. Yeah. Mette, you're right. When these developers released their chatbots, they didn't provide any type of guidance as to how to use them and how to use them properly, especially for education. That's where teachers and why my recommendations come into play and why we need to, unfortunately, be the ones to really dive in and understand these tools so that we can use them and guide their use with students properly. The cheating thing is an important issue. And I know that a lot of us don't want our students to cheat because we value the learning process. But I do want to challenge us. You know, I taught for 13 years, and I taught lots of stuff that honestly, I only taught it because I felt like I had to. And what I hope generative AI does for school systems, it makes us think like, what really is most important? And why are we teaching things the way that we're teaching them, and or what we're teaching? What really matters in this day and age? And that's a hard question that needs to be answered not just by an individual teacher, but by lots of teachers, lots of educators, and lots of systems together. From AC, what would you recommend as foundational understanding in relation to technology before implementing AI in teaching sessions? A separate intro course, for instance. You know, I actually would use generative AI in an intro course. I don't believe that there needs to be some type of intro to technology before engaging with generative AI. I think generative AI is the context for integrating that intro to technology, meaning you can use it and break it down in ways where you're introducing those same intro technology concepts, but in a generative AI context. Yes, generative AI hides a lot of the ways that we used to engage with technology. And so you might think that because of its easy interface, it makes certain skills not as significant. But in other ways, it makes other skills more important. Like, for example, when you're prompting a generative AI tool, you have to really think about the problem because you know that it's going to give you something worthwhile. So the question for you is not as much like the problem-solving process, but more so the problem formulation process. How are you thinking about a problem? Is generative AI the most useful tool for that problem? You know, that's an important technology skill right there, figuring out the right tool for the right problem, understanding the capabilities and limitations. So I would use generative AI just because it's like a very attractive thing as a context for teaching some of those introductory technology concepts. There's some other questions here as well. Pupils are by definition not familiar with the topics they are learning. What's the implication of this recommendation when it comes to use in the classroom? Okay, when I said don't use AI for topics that you're not familiar with, that was for adults because you're in charge of evaluating AI outputs, you know, whether it's a lesson plan or whatever. before you use it with students. And if you don't know about the subject material, it's hard for you to evaluate it. So that's I'm not saying it's like a hard and fast rule, but that's something you want to be aware of. When it comes to implications in the classroom, well, if a kid is asking an AI for information about a topic that they're learning, that means that they don't know about it and they're not able to evaluate the accuracy of it as well. So you should tell kids not to do that. It's not, or you use it as a context for evaluating a misinformation as well. But kids should not use generative AI chatbots as like a search engine. That's the implication for kids and in classrooms. And I'll end with Ole's question about important recommendations. I think I'll end with my recommendations as well. So I'll put that back up on the screen and wrap up with this. If a school system is thinking about engaging with AI, these are my 5 recommendations. And when it comes to school management, I mean, remember that school management and operations is just one of the 3 uses of AI. Student learning, teacher support, and school management and operations. There are a variety of things that school managers and operators can learn from the business world in terms of making school management operations more efficient, whether it's bus scheduling, class scheduling, communications, access to data, etc. So Ole, I hope that addressed that question. And I know that we're running up on time here. So, to conclude, folks, I hope this was useful. I hope you got some ideas from this. The questions that you put in the chat were very deep, and I honestly, like, some of them deserve, 5-10 minutes of talking back and forth as well. So I hope this just like whets your appetite for more AI and education thinking. I apologize if any of this was too simplistic as well. It's hard to kind of gauge the level of experience that people have with these topics. So I hope that you got something. In any case, again, please connect with me so that we can have discussions offline as well. So with that, I give it back to Michael.
Thank you very much, Pat, for a thorough, balanced, and I think very informative presentation. Thank you for the valuable references to the vast amount of useful material on the TeachAI website. And thank you for addressing the questions of from the participants, and also for your availability for interactions afterwards. That is most generous of you. So thank you very much. And thank you for reminding us that this is an opportunity to rethink education. Not a trivial task, but a very interesting task. And I think that is probably the most rewarding outcome of generative AI in the context of education, really to rethink what it's all about. Thank you very much, Pat. Enough for now and for today. What I will only wrap up by saying is that we have so far one more webinar on the agenda this semester. That's in mid-December, 11th December it is, and that's with Professor Emerita Naomi Barron from the US, talking about when AI writes for you. Naomi Barron is a professor in linguistics, and that will be a very different but also inspiring and thought-provoking presentation to be expected. So thanks again, Pat. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I hope this was useful to you. It certainly was to us here at IT West. So thank you very much again, Pat. I'm looking forward to see you out there some other time. And the rest of you, please enjoy the rest of the afternoon here in Denmark. And Pat, enjoy your day in the US. Take good
Thank
care,
you.
everybody.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
all. Bye.